Good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Breakfast Sketches. I'm Jeremy. So today I didn't really have too much of a game plan, but I knew tomorrow we were going to be doing the Justin Draws episode, and I needed to create an eye because he's going to be using that as reference in his own painting. So I figured I might as well just record it and give you guys some insight into my process. So I've drawn the sketch here. I drew the eye considerably more round than you normally would for a realistic eye, but I didn't want to go just straight for completely photorealistic. I like to add a little bit more character. So I'm starting by just blocking in some color. I know I'm not going to start with a white or a gray, so I start with adding in some more yellowy and red, orange type of tones. And I'm blocking in the iris with a darker green. It's always very important that I start with a dark green, because then that allows me to build up my highlights from there. Added in the pupil, and now I'm just starting to add in some of the shadows up at the top. I'm not going to stick with green for the shadows. Due to the absence of the warmth of the light, I'm going to go for a blue, and now I'm going to start raising the light and the saturation of the yellow that I'm putting into the highlights there at the bottom. So yeah, there I'm going for almost a complete yellow for the highlights, and then I'm adding in a little bit more intensity there at the bottom. Trying to not be perfect with it because it is an iris and you see a lot of unique details in an iris. I always like to choose a second color for my eyes so then it's not just one flat color, so I'm adding in some browns and oranges there near around the pupil just to add a little bit of interest to the piece. I always notice that near the edge of the iris at the bottom you get a little bit of a highlight on the outside of the white of the eye. And I'm adding in some more light there, just kind of starting to build up some density to the painting. So now I'm really starting to add in some shadows around the edges. I chose to not add in the flesh of the eyelids right away, and I don't know why I did that. I decided to put them in after. It just didn't quite feel right without being tied into the eyelids there. So I added in the intensity of that white light there, and now I start adding in the details. I add in the tear duct there. I'm just bringing in some more darkness around the edge of the iris, adding in some highlight there to the brown tones that I added. And I'm just continuing to massage out the colors that I want to show in the whites of the eyes. Oh, and here it is that I decide to add in the eyelids around, and this was definitely a good choice. Should have done it sooner rather than later, but so I'm adding in the top eyelid there, and then I'm going to add in the highlight for the bottom eyelid. Now I'm just going to start kind of blocking in some rough flesh tones there, trying to get some sort of shape to the skin and the eyelids. It's going to generally be lighter on top than it is on the bottom since my light source is coming from above. I'm not trying to do too much with the skin around it, just a placeholder so I know what I can start doing with the shading on the inside of the eye. Which I start doing now is I add the crease where the eyelid meets the eye, adding some more red in there. Because the eye itself, because of its very nature, it's going to interact with the light and the color around it very well, so you're going to want to add in a lot of reds and pinks and oranges around, especially around the edge of the eye, because it's actually going to pick up a lot of the color that's being reflected off the skin itself. So it's here that I start adding in some of the white intense highlights, and that's always for me when a painting starts to come alive. You can see there I added the spotlight, the direct light reflection there. And then I'm going to start adding in some ambient reflections, some just blue and some vague shapes there, just trying to give the impression that there is a world out here and these are the reflections of them. And I add some blue there at the bottom as well, just to give some bounce light from the environment. Adding in some slight reflections down there at the bottom. And I'm just going in with the skin, again doing some cleanup down there. It's here that I started to try to add in the eyelashes. Now usually I don't do close-ups of eyes, I put them on a character, so then therefore I don't really need to get into detail with eyelashes or sometimes even add them at all. So I'm not sure how well it actually worked because I'm just not too familiar with it, but I decided to leave it in because, I mean, I have to have eyelashes on a subject this close. Can't leave them out, but, yeah. We keep going with it. I'm starting to add in the shadows that would be cast by the eyelashes itself, blocking the light from getting in there. Starting to add in some more red around the edges of the eyes where you're going to start getting the blood vessels closer to the back of the eye. It's here that I really start to like the look of where the painting's going. I've added in enough detail that it's really starting to read as a realistic eye. Adding in some more pinks around the edges there. What am I doing here? Yeah, so I'm just doing some general cleanup at this point. I don't go too in depth with the cleanup of this piece. I need to be economic with my time, so I just want to put in enough that the painting reads as a realistic eye. I mean, if you zoom in, you're going to see all the imperfections, but I'm not too worried about that. Justin's going to have to attempt to replicate it, and I have a feeling that it's not going to turn out quite like this one. If you've seen the previous episode, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Continuing just to kind of smooth out the colors there. I'm adding in some blood vessels here down at the bottom. I don't like to put too much intense detail into the eye because then you start to focus on things other than the iris and the color and the contrast that's in the center. So some subtler details in the outer areas of the eye work best, I find. So I don't go for too deep a red or too dramatic of anything. So we start to just add in some more red here at the bottom. I didn't want to darken up the edges too much, so I just went for a saturated red that was actually quite light and turned down my opacity. So now I'm starting to clean up the edges of the iris here with a nice darker green-blue. Adding the darkness around the edges really helps pop the center of it with the contrast between the dark and the light there. And also solidifying the shape of the iris itself, which is just a clean circle. It really helps define it. So I'm almost finished with this piece, I think. I think this one took me just about an hour to do. Once again, just kind of trying to build up my colors in the iris a little bit more. Yeah, so adding a little bit more depth and saturation to the browns as it nears the pupil there. Just a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated. I find that's an easy cheat if you want to darken something just a little bit, but without taking away from the color, is you actually just up the saturation. It gives the illusion that it's a little bit darker. Not even with changing the value, just by upping the saturation a little bit. So I cleaned up the edges of the pupil to make that sharp line there, and I think that really helped with the whole piece. What am I doing here? I'm just adding in some final little highlights here and there. Doing some cleanup. The whole piece is just about massaging everything into place. There's not a whole lot of step-by-step with this. It's a lot of going back and forth. Once I see what's looking the worst, I focused on that, and then it's just a bit of back and forth with the colors, massaging them into place until I feel that I'm getting them right. So right now I'm trying to push back the edges of the eye by just upping the saturation on the red a bit, and I think that's where I ended off. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and I guess we'll see how Justin does with trying to replicate this tomorrow. If you haven't seen our first episode of Justin Draws, go check it out. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you later.
And we're going to do the knuckles. And how about some veins?